Pax will make a start and let other people join when they can. They will only miss my introduction anyway, and not the important part. My name is Fiona Wishlade, and I'm from the EPRC. Normally, we'd be welcoming you to our meeting room in Glasgow and finishing with a lunch, and we hope to do that again in future. But for now, we're online, and we're nevertheless delighted to welcome people. And we're also delighted to welcome Dr. Julia Bachtrögler-Unger. I hope I haven't mangled that pronunciation too awfully, who will be sharing her research and findings on the topic of understanding the effectiveness of cohesion policy through the use of satellite data. So Julia is going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then for the rest of the time there'll be a chance for questions and comments from the audience. I think everybody's used, I think, to Zoom protocols by now. But if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand, or feel free to use the chat function, and we can address those in the Q&A afterwards. Before we start, and before introducing Julia properly, we need to tell you that the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website later. We have the chance to share the recording with colleagues. It'll also be on our YouTube channel, and we'd encourage people to share their thoughts on Twitter too, and spread the word on the research that Julia is going to present. So let me introduce Julia properly. Julia is an economist in the research group Structural Change and Regional Development at WIFO, the Austrian Institute for Economic Research, and her research focuses on regional and urban economics. In particular, the analysis of economic policy measures in a regional context, regional development and convergence. And her current research activities include the analysis of the implementation and effects of EU cohesion policy at the micro and small scale level, using data on actual beneficiaries and supported projects. And Julia is now, I think, going to introduce some very interesting research that she's done using satellite data. So I give the floor to you, Julia. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Thank you very much for the invitation. Let me share my screen. All right. I hope you can see it well. In full screen mode. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So thanks again very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to share our findings and this recent research with you. This study has been joint work with the WIFO Institute in Munich and the German Aerospace Center, the DLR, which have contributed the satellite data to this study. And I also have to mention that it was a project financed by the Bertelsmann Stiftung. And what we did, or what the idea of this study was to explore possibilities of analyzing the effects of EU cohesion policy at the local level, more precisely at the level of municipalities. And our motivation was that most of previous studies evaluating EU cohesion policy have been performed at the level of NUTS2 regions. And that one common finding is that the effectiveness of EU cohesion policy differs a lot across regions. And yeah, you will all know, so regional characteristics that are found to mediate this impact are the absorptive capacity of regions, the settlement structure, and different territorial assets. But in fact, we thought that the successful implementation of EU cohesion policy relies on good projects carried out in individual cities and in municipalities within a region. And therefore, our study was motivated by the assumption that zooming in to understand what is going on at the local level, so which projects are implemented in which municipality, will help to understand this overall regional policy success better. Also in the past, so both a lack of more granular data on funding, but also on outcome variables have hampered such analysis. That's why the aim of our project, or the first aim of our project, was to gather a comprehensive database on projects co-funded by the European Regional Development Fund, the ERDF, and the Cohesion Fund, and to link it with satellite data, so remote sensing data, that could provide us with outcome variables of interest at the local level. To be more precise, we expect that satellite data could give us some good proxies for studying the economic activity at the level of municipalities. As this, to the best of our knowledge, was the first study exploring the local effects of EU cohesion policy in more than one country, because there are some studies, I think there's one study for Italy, and there are several case studies, but to study this in a multinational setting, I think it was the first study to do so. And therefore we started off with a pilot region, which are the border regions in the Czech Republic, Germany, and Poland. And if let me quickly show you on a map how much more detailed information on possible heterogeneities in policy implementation, its effects we have, or we can exploit by considering this municipality level data. You can see here on the slide our pilot region, so the border area between Czech Republic, Germany, and Poland, which consists of 17 NUTS2 regions, which again include or consist of 102 NUTS3 regions. And if we now get one level of geographical disaggregation deeper to the local administrative units level, or the municipality level, so we use this as synonyms, we have information on 6,571 units of observation, so to say. And while there will be, obviously, there will be common patterns and also similar characteristics of municipalities close to each other, we expect that studying this policy implementation at this level can be an insightful complement to the regional analysis. Okay, so in this presentation, I will give you three sets of results. So the first set of results corresponds to the EU project dataset we built, and I will show you the distribution of the ERDF and Cohesion Fund funding in the municipalities of our pilot region. Second, I will show you the result of our process of finding ways to use satellite data in this context. And as a small spoiler, we ended up with using nightlight emissions as a proxy for economic activity. And the third set of results corresponds to our econometric analysis, in which we studied the relationship between EU funding and economic activity at the local level. Okay, yeah, so the databases or our funding data set includes projects co-funded by the ERDF and the Cohesion Fund in both programming periods 2007-13 and 2014-20. The data is gathered from publicly available lists of beneficiaries and list of operations, respectively, which are published by managing authorities. And we also considered Interreg project information from the KEEP database. When we gathered and standardized this data in one data set, the most important task in the context of this study was to geolocate the projects and assign them a municipality code or a local administrative unit code. And for this, we used in most cases we used project postcodes or city names reported in this list of operations, and assigned it allow code. In several cases in the old program period, we needed to find some workarounds, as only beneficiary information and only location information on the beneficiary was available, but not on the project. But if you're interested, I can talk about this later on in more detail. In fact, we have a data set of 190,000 projects carried out in these 6,571 municipalities in our pilot region. You can see them here. So on the left-hand side, you have the sum of ERDF and Cohesion Fund commitments per thousand inhabitants in the 2007-2013 period. On the right-hand side, you have the same variable for the 2014-2020 period. And what becomes the light green and the yellow colored municipalities receive more or are allocated more funds than the blue colored ones. And what becomes apparent at first sight is that the Czech municipalities and the Polish municipalities in our pilot region receive more funds than the German ones. For example, here right at the left-hand side, you have Bavaria, a very rich region, and also according to the principle of assigning or allocating the funds according to economic development, it is not very surprising, of course, that Bavaria receives much less than other regions in the border area in the Czech Republic and Poland. You can also see some spatial agglomerations. For example, here, I hope you can see my my cursor. Here we have, for example, the city of Wrocław in Poland, where you see that there seems to be some spatial spillovers or in the attraction of EU funding. This is why we will also, of course, take into account spatial spillovers in our econometric analysis. Let me give you some more descriptive insights on our project data set. So on average, in both program periods, a total of 33 projects is carried out in one municipality in our pilot region. The maximum number is 7,000 projects that is reported for the city of Dresden. We also find a highly skewed distribution of the average size of an individual project. So on average, the average funding amount per project is 169,000 euros, whereas the median is 50,000 euros. So more half of projects is have a project value of 50,000 or less. The funding per project is also smallest in the German municipalities in our sample and highest in Polish municipalities, which will also reflect the funding strategies. So most of the Polish funding in our regions, in our pilot region, are attributed to transport infrastructure projects, while only a small share of German funding is allocated to large transportation infrastructure projects. Another finding is that, keeping other things equal, more funding is attributed or allocated to municipalities with initially higher economic activity, as indicated by our small-scale measure, which may also reflect the fact that much ERDF funding is allocated via business support and to research and innovation projects, which are likely to be carried out in cities, in areas where there's already a well-developed business infrastructure and ecosystem. Okay, so this was, so to say, some insights on our project dataset. I will now motivate a bit more in detail why we thought that it could make sense to use satellite data for estimating this local effects of EU cohesion policy. Well, yeah, the main reason was that we thought, okay, especially in countries such as Poland, where still a large share of cohesion policy funds is attributed to transportation infrastructure projects, somehow you should see these projects from the space, so to say. And as one example, I can show you a map or a very detailed view of Miszków, a small town in Poland. Here you can see the picture in the year 2014. And in this 2014 to 20 program period, a bypass road has been financed by the ERDF and the Cohesion Fund, and we can see in the satellite image that this road was built. We can also see that not only the road was built, I shift a bit forth and back, but also a commercial area was built alongside the road. And we also did some interviews with local policymakers or practitioners there. They also confirmed that businesses started to settle there in this area because of the new road connection. And so that is just one example. And of course, we could not track every single project in such a detailed satellite image. And that's why we explored the possibility of using nightlight emissions. And as you can see on the next pictures, is again the same area. You can see here in the year 2014, so where the road had not been built yet. And if we move to the year 2019, you see that especially in the area of this new commercial area built, nightlight emissions have increased considerably, while the extent of nightlight emissions in the other parts of the city have remained relatively stable. So that's why we thought, okay, that nightlight emissions could be a useful proxy for economic activity in our setting here, which is also objective and can be used for also for a pan-European setting, because this is also something we consider we want to, our aim would be to extend this analysis to the whole of Europe, of course. Yeah, about nightlight emissions. You might know that, or you will know that that in development economics, nightlight emissions as a proxy for economic development have been widely used. But in recent years, there are also several papers that have applied nightlight emissions as a proxy for economic activity to the European regions. And indeed, also for our pilot region, we find a significant correlation between economic activity and nightlight emission, or to be more precise, we found a correlation between the change in economic activity and the change in nightlight emissions. And again, maybe as a sort of motivation, you can see on this screen the nightlight emissions in Europe in the year 2000. you can directly see agglomerations like Paris, Milan, Rome, Madrid. And if we move to the year 2019, we see that although there's already a significant amount of nitrate emissions there in 2000, there's still an increase. Not, or nevertheless, or how to put it, although we have a weaker correlation between nitrate emissions and economic development in developed countries and in our EU regions than in developing countries, we still think that nitrate emissions could be a suitable proxy, also in the context of EU regions. That is why we, in order to link now this nitrate emission data with the funding data, we calculated an average increase in nitrate emissions, for example, from 2014 to 2019 for the municipalities in our pilot region. And this will be the basis, or the data we will also use in our econometric analysis. So the main result of this second part of our project was that we calibrated and pre-processed multi-temporal large-scale satellite data. We managed to aggregate it at the suitable unit of analysis at this level of local administrative units, and therefore can use it as a proxy for economic development. And the fact that we could link it to local administrative units allows us to link the satellite data with the project database. Okay, now I come to the third part, in which we now want to bring these two datasets together and study the effect of cohesion policy on local economic activity. Maybe one thing I have not told you so far, the correlation between the nightlight emission, or the change in nightlight emissions, and the change in GDP, which we have available at the NUTS 3 regional level, is 19.5%, meaning that we could explain about 20% of the variation in GDP growth in the NUTS 3 regions, in our pilot region, with this change in nightlight emissions. This share is comparable with the one found in the other studies that have explored the usability of nitrate emissions in the context of EU regions, and therefore, we will consider this share in the interpretation of our results. But we were quite happy to see this highly statistical significant correlation, also when considering some control variables. I won't talk about this in too much detail in this presentation, but in the paper we have a dedicated section to verifying this correlation between nitrate emissions and GDP growth. Coming now to the econometric analysis. Of course, an ideal experiment would be the case if funds were randomly allocated in space, which is by design or by regulation not the case, as we know that less developed regions receive high amounts of funding than other regions, and also that the municipalities in less developed regions are likely to receive more than other municipalities. Moreover, it is likely that the EU funding amount committed to a municipality depends on regional and local unobservable characteristics, such as administrative capacity, political economy factors, or the presence of innovative actors that are more capable to develop innovative and successful projects than other actors. And also we have I've already presented before that the EU funding committed to a region is linked to the level of initial nightlight emission in a municipality. And to account for this, we control for the initial nightlight emission in 2007 here in our estimation equation. We also control for the share of urban area and the share of cropland, as well as the population in each municipality. So this is included here in our vector of control variables X at the level of municipalities. And in order to control for unobservable factors at the NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 regional level, we include NUTS 3 or NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 regional dummies. In this equation, we have on the left-hand side the change in nightlight emissions. So this is our proxy for the change in economic activity, and we use a log difference here. And you see here in this where this coefficient beta 1 refers to the amount of funding allocated to a municipality. So, so if this funding amount would be uncorrelated to other economic conditions, once we control for all these control variables and NUTS 2, NUTS 3 regional effects, we could talk of a causal effect. However, in our setting, unfortunately, we cannot ensure this. That's why our empirical results should be interpreted as correlation and not as causal estimates. So what we will find, and what I will show you in a second, is the relationship between the change in nightlight emissions and the funding amount allocated to a region, which indicates whether municipalities which have received more funding grew stronger. So what we will want to get, or what we would expect, is that this beta 1 here is positive, so that the funding is linked to a higher change in nightlight emissions. And that is also what we find. So I just have here one results table. You can see that this coefficient beta 1, so the effect of a higher funding amount, increases the change in nightlight emissions. The coefficients can be interpreted in that way that a 1% increase of funding is associated with a 0.00% higher growth in nightlight emissions. And we can translate this to the expected impact on the change in economic activity by considering this correlation factor of 20%. And this means that our finding shows that a 1% increase in funding is associated with a 0.001% higher GDP growth. On the slide, you see 4 specifications, and the results are quite similar. Also for the 2014 to 20 period, we do the same analysis. And again, taking into account the coefficients we find here and the correlation between nightlight emissions and GDP growth, which we found for the NUTS 3 level, we find that receiving 1% more EU funding is, keeping other things equal, associated with a 0.00.1 higher 0.001% higher GDP growth. So this finding is the same across the program periods. And as for the robustness check, we also removed observations with zero funding, plus, so in our baseline regression, we did some transformation of the funding amounts in order to consider this highly skewed distribution of funding amounts to municipality. As a robustness checks, we eliminated this transformation, and we also found similar results. In another specification, we have also allowed for spatial spillovers, the ones which we expect, given the descriptive statistics also I've shown you before. And indeed, we find a positive spillover to a municipality from the funding amount allocated to municipalities in the neighboring areas, which we take as a sign that the findings here in the baseline results are underestimate the effects of cohesion policy on economic activity at the local level. Yes, I mean, here I have one more result, so to say, because we expected that the effect of funding on economic development may differ across project types. You can see here the categories we considered for and which we used for classifying the projects. And we would have expected that infrastructure projects such as energy infrastructure, environmental infrastructure, transportation infrastructure have a statistically significant effect, as they are, so to say, visible in space, as in this example in Mishkov. But we found it then remarkable that the highest coefficient is found for R&D and innovation projects, which is in line with previous literature on cohesion policy evaluation. So, and we found it remarkable that it's also present, that we also find it in this study. One reason is that a large share of the R&D and innovation projects is related to R&I infrastructure, and that is something we also can see in space. Projects in the area of social inclusion and employment and ICT infrastructure did not have a significant effect according to our study. And this is also something we also find in other studies, which does not mean that employment and social inclusion projects should not be funded anymore, but employment and social inclusion projects, for example, more somehow support the preconditions for economic activity, and they do not directly contribute to economic growth. That would be our implications from this. I will skip this slide and come, so this is the summary of our results, and the summary of the contributions of the study. So it was the first to document and analyze the spatial distribution of EU structural and cohesion funding at the level of municipalities in more than one country. Another contribution is really this finding, I think, that remote sensing data can indeed be used to explore the local effects of EU policies. What we want to do in the future with this is to roll out our approach to further European regions in order to get a more systematic view on this. And a key requirement, of course, is the availability of geocoded data at the level of individual projects, but there are several projects run by DG Regio and the Joint Research Center, which take care of this. And what I think is very relevant is that satellite data is not only nightlight emissions data, which could be used as a proxy for economic activity, but we could also go for more environmental variables and study the effects of cohesion policy on, for example, green spaces, on air quality, on the local access to public infrastructure. And I think that, yeah, also in this, given the challenges ahead and the strong focus of the future EU cohesion policy on the green topics, on the way, on supporting the way towards the zero carbon economy, this can be very relevant. Okay, let me stop here and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia. That was really interesting. I'm sure there are questions from the floor, but can I just ask one? I thought the slide that you had on the type of funding, you know, was really interesting and quite surprising. And I just wonder whether you thought that, or to what extent you can control for time lags in the type of funding, and for instance the fact that investing in employment and you know, and training and so on may have a significant impact on GDP growth, but not necessarily within the time scale that you're looking at, and whether that's something that you can control for within the study.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. I do think that there is considerable time lag of such projects. I mean, yeah, something I did not mention was unfortunately we cannot do the analysis from the year 2007 to the year 2019 all through, because we have a break in the time series of the nightlight emissions. That is why we need, so there are two different sensors, and the data from the one sensor is provided until the year 2013, and then the data provided by the other sensor starts up from there. And until now, according to the colleagues at DLR, there's no way to interlink those. I mean, that is something which you might could analyze better if you have a longer time series. I totally agree. Yes, I mean, also that R&D and innovation projects, yeah, we expect, we would have also expected to see more a longer time lag, so to say, because like these infrastructure projects, you are really, yeah, you can see them directly in space, no, in the satellite images, as I've shown in this one example. R&D innovation, of course, also not, but again, really a large part of this R&D innovation project is R&D infrastructure, and that is why, yeah, so again, this is more visible in space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, I probably have other questions, but I'll open up to other people to chip in with theirs first. Does anybody want to come in with something? Or I'll give you a chance to...
I'm happy to come in, Fiona.
Oh, have you got something, Carlos? Go.
Sure. On that previous chart that you mentioned, on the employment and social, I think it was social inclusion that you mentioned, could one factor be also the social fund in investments, which presumably in the German case would possibly account for around 50%, which I think is excluded from your analysis. It's ERDF and Cohesion Fund only. Of course, yeah, I'm well aware that these are social fund is for individuals, but you know, I'm not so sure about your point about it being a precondition for growth. I mean, there are studies that show that actually social employment investments are potentially more effective in the cohesion policy case in terms of growth. But I don't know, it's more of an observation whether you have any reflections on this social fund dimension, which of course is not as visible as big cohesion fund projects and it's individual based, but potentially relevant to the calculations of EU funding receipts.
Yeah. I mean, what I meant by this precondition, so within the ERDF, or maybe also with the ESF, because for example, we also have, we did one study for Austria, where we studied the effects of EC funds, so that was also including this agricultural fund for rural development, on regional employment from 1994 to 2017. And for example, there we found that the ERDF and this agricultural fund for rural development have statistically significant and strong effects on employment growth over this whole period, but the ESF have not. And we also had a look at the projects and so on. And our what we drew from that is that this employment and also the ESF funding goes through training, so projects linked to training, to improving the matching of employees and employers at the labor market. It's such things which we somehow seen as a precondition then for realizing more production or more growth. And that's what I meant by this sort of precondition. I mean, now in this satellite study, obviously also, employment and social inclusion projects are most likely less visible in space. That's why we were not surprised of this result in this context.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julia. From a methodological point of view, I mean, something that you mentioned a couple of times was the geolocation of beneficiaries, and I mean, that's sort of like quite often a problem when you look at sort of like databases and you find that you know, there's this sort of like concentration of beneficiaries in capital cities because that's where head offices are located. So how did you get around that you know, that issue? Have you got a specific data set that deals with that?
Thanks for this question. What we have, so in the this information or whether we got project locational information or beneficiary locational information depends very much on the list of operations and list of beneficiaries. So for this current period, or the period 2014 to 20, the managing authorities are required to report the project location. So for all the projects in Germany and Poland, as well as the Czech Republic, we had a postcode on the project, on considering the project information. For the Czech Republic, we also had the project level information in the 2007 to 13 period. In the other, in Germany and in Poland not. If I remember. Oh, no, in Poland we also had the project information. So yeah, it was the case in most cases that we don't have a problem. However, for the indirect projects, for example, we only have beneficiary locational information, which might be a problem. However, in this case, it is also more likely that the projects are carried out where the beneficiary is, as it is in cooperation projects. We thought, and yeah, I think it is likely that the beneficiary location equals the project location. But yeah, in these cases where we only have beneficiary information, this of course is an issue. Mm-hmm. However, the good thing is we needed to go to a business database for the German database in the 2007-13 period, because this database, for example, has this headquarter bias you mentioned, no? That it is not the addresses of the individual firms reported there, but the headquarters. But yeah, it was only a small share where we needed to use this workaround. So we, for this pilot region, we are quite convinced that we got the right location. But of course, this is a limitation which we always have to keep in mind here.
Yep. Okay, thanks for that. Does anybody else have any further questions for Julia?
Fiona, it's not so much a question, just a like an observation on what Julia presented. A really interesting presentation, and thinking about the application to initiatives like integrated territorial investments, and trying to pick up, as you say, these granular place-based approaches. And I think it can be, what you've described can be really useful in that way. I mean, to what extent do you think this can capture this sort of functional spatial category, you know, outside of specific local administrative units, and capture the dynamics perhaps between projects in a functional area, the sort of things that ITI is trying to support? I mean, I suppose the other thing that's impossible for this approach to capture is if you like, the less tangible impacts of these strategies, you know, in terms of, you know, collaboration and networking and so on. But I certainly see, you know, how this could sort of make the picture a lot clearer in terms of these new cohesion policy territorial instruments.
This is thanks for this comment. This is something I would be very interested in for future researches. Yeah, to really see this, to explore this distribution of the EU funding in functional urban areas. No? Yeah. I mean, because there was also one paper, which is already, I think it was by Coco, who has found that on the regional level that the effects of cohesion policy on economic development is highest in rural areas surrounding larger urban centers. And yeah, I also think that our framework here would allow such analysis and really at very granular level. So that's something I would definitely like to go for, yeah, to explore more in detail. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Julia. I mean, it'd be interesting to know, you know, what other like policy implications you think there might be from using this data. What, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, now really considering this framework with the satellite data, I would be really most interested, or something I would be very much interested in, is considering this environmental outcome variables. So I think that this really is a chance here, and yeah, I think that would be very crucial. Now with this project level data, or this data on the distribution of EU funding at this very granular level, I think that you could also analyze in great detail whether the EU funding was, or the project selection was indeed really done based on the smart specialization strategies, for example. So maybe it doesn't matter too much in which municipality that has taken place, but this project level data really gives you a lot of insights on the project. We have very detailed project descriptions, so that I think would be possible using this data, and yeah.
Okay, well, that's been absolutely fascinating. I don't know if there are any more questions, but we're running up against lunchtime, especially in continental Europe. So maybe I can say a big thank you to Julia for joining us today and presenting some really interesting results from the research. And I think we have a link to your paper from our website, and the recording will be available too for people who weren't able to make it at this time. So our next webinar is going to be on the 3rd of November on nature-based solutions for transforming governance for urban sustainable development by Dr. Li Junzi from the University of Nottingham. And please contact us to register if you're not already registered, to keep up to date on future events. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you soon. So thanks very much for your interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.